Well, yes, Ecotopians. We're going to be doing things a little bit different this time. As part of our conclusion of looking at the biotic aspects of redwood ecosystems, I wanted you to understand several of the specific communities that are in redwood ecosystems, not just redwood forest, there are others as well. And so I put together this special video for you. It is a meeting of communities near the Mad River, where the Mad River meets the ocean. And I do want to apologize in advance. I just missed out my education in Hollywood and I have no technical expertise in stitching together videos. So the audio's terrible, the video's terrible, but I do hope this video gets the point across. This is a cool place, and I hope you pay attention. I'll try to add text and stuff so you know exactly what to study for your tests. But mostly, I hope you get a lot of appreciation for these fantastic communities that we have here. Beautiful gray day at the beach. Trying to avoid looking at the remnants of party animals who don't clean up after themselves. Wish they would. Nice pieces of metal. That'd be great on their bare feet. Ooh, broken glass. Well, moving along. We'll go. It is January still. It's the third week of January, and California is talking about drought, drought, drought. And for the first time, and it seems like weeks, there's rain in the forecast. So, very excited about that. I wonder what the situation is now that the class has started. Uh-oh. See? Never turn your frickin' back on the ocean! Ah! Almost got me. Nobody knows where I am. This could be bad. I need to be careful. Sometimes, when you look at the waves crash, you see all the foam. The foam's not white. Sometimes it's kind of brown, and you think, oh, it's scummy. What is wrong with this water? Well, I'm a biologist, so one time I collected a bunch of this stuff, scooped it up into a bottle I found on the beach, and uh-oh, gotta move. And I brought it back to a friend of mine. Actually, what I did was I have a microscope, so I put it under the microscope, and I saw these really cool things in the water, in this scum. I knew they were diatoms, a kind of plankton, a photosynthetic microscopic organism. And so I don't know what that stuff is. I have not been trained, but one of the nice things about being a biologist is you get to know other biologists who are specialists in different areas. So I had a friend, a graduate student at Humboldt State, who knows about this kind of stuff. And I said, hey man, what is this stuff? And he wrote me back. He said it's Asterionelloides socialis. I think I got that right, but man, I couldn't spell it if I had to. And it's a common diatom in this area. What's it doing? It's photosynthesizing. It's doing the equation of life on Earth. It's fixing carbon dioxide, and it's making food for itself, which also happens to be food for things that eat it. And so the diatoms are the primary producers, some of them, of the ocean. And they're feeding fish, I guess. They're feeding plankton, zooplankton, which are eaten by fish, which are eaten by other fish, and so on and so forth, and makes this whole area very dynamic and diverse. My way to that piece of driftwood, but you'll see maybe in the distance a whole flock of birds. I don't know what they are, probably gulls because they're kind of big. And you also see my silly dogs, which love nothing more than to run up and down this beach chasing birds. Which, I don't know if there's seagulls, who really cares? Seagulls are kind of the pigeon of the sea strand, but actually there's a species here called the snowy plover that's rare and endangered. And I should not run my dogs on the beach when those birds are breeding, and that's usually spring and through summer until the babies get bigger. Whoa, there you go, never turn your back on the sea. And so I don't. I'm careful about that because I do not want the snowy plovers to go extinct. I don't know much about them, but I think they should not go extinct. I like species diversity, and there's other places I can take my dogs for exercise. Oh, look at this. This is a nice big chunk of wood. It's been cut. Somebody chainsawed this thing. Wow. So I'm thinking not redwood, and you know why? Because those rings are pretty far apart. It could be a redwood. Who knows? Really hard to tell. I'm always counting the rings on trees. I like to know how old they were. How long ago was it when this tree was a little baby that put down that first ring? How many years has it been? This one? Just guess. I'm going to guess, oh, maybe 100 years. 100 years ago. So when was that? 1900? 13 or 14? Looks like it experienced some burns. It was a burnt tree that was then cut. Yikes! Missed me again. And then somehow it got washed out to sea, and then washed up here for us to ponder. Love looking at stuff at the beach. What's washed up? Now, most people, look, I'm going to get washed away here. Uh-oh. I'm going to grab this thing and run. Ow! 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 No, it's alright. Alright, I'm good. What is this thing? Ugh, gross. I think it's a jellyfish. Yep, it's a jellyfish. Okay. Jeez. What else is the ocean washed up? Let's see. Midge and eelgrass. Eelgrass is really important. We'll talk more about that later. Kidding you. I just found this wonderful football on the beach. Ha ha ha. Now I got something. These are clams. Good eating, they say. I've never eaten them, but I hear they're good. Kelp, of course. Kelp. The redwood tree of the ocean, at least here in the Pacific Northwest. Really important aquatic plant. Has a little swollen floater thing here, and all the blades here are they're not really leaves botanically, but we'll call them blades. But they do the same thing. They do the photosynthesis, and this long stem that goes a long way, grows really fast, and grabs on, holds fast to some rock, but I guess this one gave, and this guy floated away and will now die. These guys are amazing. Kelp, really important. Talk more about that later, maybe. One of my favorite birds around here, all throughout North America, is the raven. Raven looks a lot like a crow, but there's some distinguishing features. Ravens usually come in pairs or very small family groups, whereas crows are in flocks, and ravens go caw, caw, a very hoarse, croaky call, whereas crows go caw, 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 caw. There's a couple of ravens up there. Ravens are larger. They have a bigger, thicker bill, and their tail shape is different from crows. The raven has a diamond point to it, whereas crows have a sort of just a flat across tail. And ravens are just smart. I love watching them. They do all sorts of interesting things. So it's You'll see them in town, maybe. More likely you'll be seeing crows in town, although they're both in Arcata. But keep an eye open for these are native species, and keep an eye open for the crows and see if you can distinguish the two. And beachgrass was introduced to this area to control erosion. Now, we are looking southeast, and you can see the wind sweeps right through here and moves the sand. And in the distance, I don't know if you can see, there's a farm. So that farmland there is at risk of getting covered with sand. And if there's a road built here, they'd be worried too about sand over their houses. So in their wisdom, the powers that be planted European beachgrass, which does a really good job of stabilizing the dunes. But as we'll see later, it also crowds out a lot of native vegetation, so it has some negative environmental effects as well. I mentioned how the sand is constantly shifted up and down, inland and back out to sea by the waves and the winds, and I said that sometimes it gets blown up like snowdrifts up here. And here I am walking, and it's sort of an older drift. This stuff probably got blown up, I don't know, maybe last fall or summer. And you can see there's a little bit of contour here and there, and it's being eaten away by the waves. And sometime when we get a big windstorm, it'll all get thrown back up. But in the meantime, this European beachgrass, with its extensive root system, is holding that sand in and allowing this huge dune here to form. Now I'm going to try to climb up this stuff, and we'll take a look on the other side. Yikes. Don't try this at home. There we go. Gotta be careful, this stuff is sharp as hell. This European beachgrass has very sharp tips. Once I got it poked in my eye, it was a drag. Okay, here we are at the top. And you can see what a great job your European beachgrass is doing. Okay guys, there was an audio glitch there, and I think I put my thumb over the mic or something like that. But I wanted to explain to you some really important aspects of this beach environment. We'll come back to European beachgrass in a moment, but let's just talk about the process of beach formation and sand dune formation. So what happens, as you already know, is that the mountains are eroding, and the sand, silt, and clay from the mountains is being transported by the streams and rivers out to the sea. So the Mad River is basically transporting all the sand from the mountains out into the ocean. And so then the ocean picks it up, and as we mentioned earlier regarding climate and fog formation, that there is the California current that runs from the northwest along the coast of California. So it picks up the sand and transports it south. And so then there is this complicated interaction between the current and the waves and the storms and the wind that shape the coastline, and particularly shapes the sand dunes. So what happens is that, well, I guess I'll put it this way. Sometimes there are very strong winds from the northwest, particularly after a storm passes by, a cold front in winter and in spring. And maybe you've been out to the beach on a really windy day and been stung by the grains of sand that hit your feet. And at low tide, what happens is that wind dries the sand and then picks it up and blows it inwards. And I have actually seen like snow drifts or sand drifts of sand just freshly blown up onto shore from the last big windstorm. So that allows wind to accumulate the sand, and for the sand to accumulate and build up into sand dunes. But there is a negative interaction in which the big winter storms, the big waves that come in, eat away at the sand dunes and put it back in the ocean. So there's this constant shifting back and forth by the wind and by the ocean of the sand. And once the other element you have to take into account is the living element. Once that sand moves in, it's kind of like primary succession. The plants that are there that can stand that kind of environment hold on to it, they start growing, and they start holding on to the sand and stabilize the dunes, at least for a little while. And if they can stabilize the dunes long enough, you get primary succession and secondary succession. Well, succession continues until you can get even forest. So that's what I'm showing you here. Is some, well, in a moment, some later successional stages of sand dunes. Sand dunes can actually get covered by forest until they get blown out by some random occurrence, a nick in the sand dune that allows wind to blow by and causes erosion. Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to say, and we'll get back to the movie. Thanks. Here's a spot where the wind has won the battle against the dunes, more or less, and blown the dunes away. There's a few clumps of European beach grass here with a shadow of sand behind them. And I just wanted to focus in here a little bit closer. As the sand blows away, the lighter particles blow away first, and the heavier particles don't blow away because they're too heavy. And so if you look in, you can start seeing some other things left behind after all the sand's been blown away. A bunch of different rocks and just some coarser sand particles than, well, gravel, I guess. And beautiful rocks, beautiful Mad River rocks, all sorts of different kinds. A red sandstone. Oh, I don't know what this stuff is, but it's beautiful. Lots of different kinds of rocks. So temporarily, score 1 for the wind, but the sand will be back. Right behind us is the Mad River, and who knows, maybe someday the Mad River will have a flood and come down here and decide to jump the bank here and go right over here to the ocean, which is just on the other side. So the mouth of the rivers are always moving back and forth if left to their own devices. Humans tend to try to armor things and keep everything stable and predictable. If you're living up there, that's the McKinleyville, some of the high rent houses in McKinleyville, very valuable real estate, gorgeous view. They probably don't want their banks eroding too much, so if they can convince the government or do it themselves, they'll armor the bank here and prevent it from eroding. But in the meantime, it looks pretty much like the Mad River is being left to its own devices here. This is the Mad River. Not too far from Mad River County Park, which is a beach. I'm looking eastward, and you can't really see the mountains because we're having a series of storms coming through this weekend, bringing much desired rain in this drought winter we've been having so far. It's pretty wide right here, the Mad River, and actually there's very little fresh water coming down because of the drought, and yet the river is really wide here because it's meeting the ocean, and at high tide the ocean's pushing salt water up through the mouth this way. And so this is technically an estuary where the water reverses flow a couple times a day with the tides coming in and going out, and it's where the fresh water meets the salt water. And because of that, you have a lot of different habitats mixing, both marine and freshwater, but also coastal beach, and then all the other terrestrial ecosystems. Right on the other side of the Mad River here, there's a whole line of probably willow trees. Willows, maybe some alders, and it's called riparian habitat. It's very rich habitat, really great for lots of different animals, such as, oh, a pair of mallards over there. Quack, 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 quack. Male mallards make a honking sound that always reminds me of Bozo the Clown. Ha 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 ha. There's a pair of them going away. Well, in this riparian area, in this estuary, I mean, we have a lot of what are called anadromous fish moving up. An anadromous fish, anadromous, A-N-A-D-R-O-M-O-U-S, fish. Well, they begin their lives way upstream as eggs. They hatch out, they become little tiny fish that make their way eventually down to the ocean, and there they mature, and little fish feed on big fish, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger until they're ready to breed, and then they swim back upstream. And you probably know that's the salmon life cycle in a nutshell. Different species of salmon, such as Chinook and the endangered coho salmon, which live in this stream, and also steelhead. And there's other fish too, such as eels that the Eel River is named after. So we'll see more about this Mad River soon, and we'll see more at Mad River Beach. But I just wanted to show another thing. We just had a downpour of rain, and one of the things that happens is over the summer months or all year round, cars drive by on roads and they drop little bits of oil and stuff, and then the rains come and the rain picks all that stuff up and it flows away. And during this storm, this rain has washed the road and is entering, and this is a good example of non-point source pollution. And so that pollution is going in. Now it's carrying pollutants such as oil and antifreeze and whatever drops off of cars, but also sediment. So that milky color down there is probably mostly silt or clay that's washed off from this area. You see my car here adding to the problem and washing out into here. Maybe not such a big deal here in the Mad River because we're here at the estuary. It's going out into the ocean, but at a larger scale it can be a huge problem where this sediment washes into the streams and covers up the gravel that the anadromous fish need to lay their eggs in and ruins their habitat so they can't breed. So sediment in waters is a pollutant that it's really important to control. It's caused a lot of problems. All right, here we are again at the Mad River Slough. We've got various birds flying around and swimming, and what I wanted to show you was this wet area. Now, wet sandy areas are great because they leave lots of tracks. Everybody leaves a track here, and you can figure out what's been going on. Here's a track. Hey, that's my shoe. Huh, it's going away. I guess I've been here before. Well, I was. I checked this place out, and I want to show you what other tracks can we find here. Ooh, lots of tracks here. What do we got? Dogs. I count 1, 2, 3 toes. Dogs have more toes than that, but the other ones are obscured, and they leave nail prints at the end because dogs can't retract their nails. So a lot of people bring their dogs up here. They run all over the place. But what else do we see? In this area, it's really wet and leaves good tracks. Also, other kinds of sign. Ooh, what do we have here? Poop. Now, bear with me, guys. I know this might be gross to some of you, but you can tell a lot from poop. This is really, it's brightly colored because there's a lot of shells in it. That means it's not dog poop, which I would not poke with a stick. But because it's something else and interesting, I am going to poke it. Guess what? I was wrong. It's not poop. It's a cork. Oh well. See if it floats. Yep. Track it's pretty large. That is a big track. And it's a bird. 1, 2, 3. It's not webbed, so what bird has really long toes, no webbing, and likes to hang out near the water? Well, that would be probably an egret. Another thing, there's different kinds of egrets. We'll maybe talk about that later. Another large egret-like bird is a great blue heron. But I don't think this is a great blue heron because those guys have really long feet, toes. That's a bird track. 1, 2, 3 toes and with webbing. See that line there and here? That's webbing. So this is our seagulls have been hanging out here. So the dunes are not the kind of place where you would expect to find mushrooms. Most people go into the woods to find mushrooms, but some of us who constantly have our eyes open for such things seek and shall find. If my dog doesn't tread over these, we can look at them for a while. So I know enough about mushrooms to know that I probably shouldn't start talking about them because once I get started, I can't stop. But let's suffice to say that mushroom fungi are everywhere, pretty much everywhere, even if you don't see the mushrooms. And the key to understanding that, how can they be everywhere when you don't see them, is to understand that every mushroom is simply the reproductive part of a fungus. And the main part of the fungus is down below in what's called the substrate. Whatever it is where it's getting its nutrition from. And you can see that white area down below. The bottom of this mushroom is connected to what's called a mycelium, a white, like mold, that goes down and is almost invisible, although it's everywhere in the soil, and is busy decomposing any dead matter it can find to eat, because that's how they get their food, by decomposition. And every now and then they decide to reproduce and they form a mushroom which has a spore-bearing tissue, in this case the gills on the underside of the mushroom. And so that's mushrooms in a nutshell. And there's lots and lots of species. And yes, you don't find many here in the dunes, but some. Where would you find more? You find a lot of mushrooms in the forest. So hopefully in your redwood ecosystems, whether you go in redwoods or under willow or alder or Douglas fir, you will be on the lookout not just for plants and animals, but also fungi. Here is a thicket of willows on the edge of the Mad River. And I just want to take this shot here because we're seeing some signs of spring here. If you're looking closely, you can see that they have broken bud and are making not only leaves, but also what are technically called inflorescences, or groups of flowers. These guys right here are pussy willows. We call them pussy willows because they look like cat's feet, I guess, something like that. But there's lots and lots and lots of flowers being grown in here. And they're gorgeous. It's a sign of spring. And to me, this means something else, because I learned that willow, well, I was looking into willow because salix is the Latin name for willow, salix. And aspirin that we take for headaches and pain is a chemical called salicylic acid. And salicylic acid is named after willows, because it was derived initially from the bark of willow trees. I don't know where they get it now. But it's an extremely bitter taste. If you want to chew on a willow, you can sometime, just to test me. But if you taste an aspirin pill, you'll see it's bitter also. So that's interesting, but why is willow making salicylic acid? I don't really know, but people investigating willow have discovered something else. That willow tree is very high in a plant growth hormone that causes rooting. So I will gather a bunch of these sticks, and I'll just cut them, take them home, and boil them, and make a tea out of it, which is very bitter. I don't drink it. But I dip my cuttings into in the hopes of stimulating root formation. I do a lot of plant propagation, not marijuana, other kinds of plants. But I suppose you could try it with any kind of plant to get above ground cuttings. You could cut this and stick it in the ground and root it. A lot of plants won't root, but if you get this tea, it stimulates that rooting. And it's been kind of helpful to me. So, willow, a cool local plant with a lot of interesting uses. I am on the Hammond Bridge, a pedestrian and bicycle bridge that goes across the Mad River, not too far from its mouth. Looking upstream now, so McKinleyville would be to the left. And in the background, which you can't see because it's cloudy, is our watershed, the Mad River watershed. Now, Mad River up there is dammed, and behind that dam is Ruth Lake, and water from Ruth Lake goes down to the Mad River and enters the aquifer there. And some is above ground in the river and others below ground in the aquifer. And that aquifer is tapped by the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District and supplies the water for, let's see, Arcata, Eureka, McKinleyville, and I think some other towns. So we owe our water, our life, to this watershed. We get our water from it. Very important. So it flows down here, comes underneath the bridge, and goes down that way, now looking west towards Mad River County Park. This bridge here was built originally by railroad companies to haul timber from Blue Lake out to Samoa. And that was done a couple of different ways. One is by rail, And also just at a site down there, someplace down there, they actually built a canal at one point, I think, to float lumber from the Mad River down across the Humboldt Bay, which is down in that direction. And the sign over here says that 250,000 board feet of redwood lumber was milled from here, from the Mad River watershed, every day. 250,000 board feet. I don't know how much that is, but it sounds like a lot. Nothing like that is happening now, which isn't to say that the timber industry is dead. It's still around, and just north of Blue Lake, upstream, is Corbell, where there's a lumber mill. There's a couple of lumber mills here and there, but it's nothing like what it was in the day. And so they've converted this rail line here into a nice recreational resource, the Hammond Bridge, which you can easily access from McKinleyville or from Arcata off Gintoli Lane. As I may have said before, there's a lot of natural resources still in this river, the Mad River, and we focus on the fish, the anadromous fish. So we have steelhead, we have Chinook salmon, and we have coho salmon. And we watch those numbers pretty closely because they go up and down, and especially coho salmon, the numbers are very low. And we may be seeing some extirpation or extinction of some populations of coho, not here in the Mad River yet anyway, but in Southern California, as the climate seems to be getting warmer and drier and the rivers are dropping. So, the Mad River, come out here sometime and check it out. Earlier today we had a bunch of rain come through, and you can see the clouds are moving to the west, and there we have the mountains behind Arcata. That's just Fickle Hill. Behind it would be more mountains, all the way up to the Trinities and the Olabolis. But I look at this now in terms of thinking about watersheds. This is our watershed being recharged. Water being transported from the ocean onto land and dropped onto our watershed. And we depend upon it for so many things. It's really an important, magical, mystical thing. So when it rains around here, those of us who think about ecology and watersheds, we're really happy. We need it. We depend upon it. It's a good thing.